Hey everyone, Joe here for Hacky Lessons. OP09 is right around the corner, so I'm starting to work out my deck list for the upcoming new meta, which introduces 6 new leaders. 4 of them are Emperors, which are Shanks, Buggy, Blackbeard, and Luffy, and then we also have Robin and Lim. The decks that interest me the most are Luffy, Robin, and Lim. And the deck that I'm playing at the moment is Purple Luffy, and that may or may not be what I play at Nationals coming up in January. So looking through all these decks that I intend to be my main decks going forward in the next few months, they all can and maybe do run purple Straw Hats. So that is going to involve a lot of the same cards in all switching between sleeves. So what I thought I would do for this video is go through all these leaders, including Red Purple Luffy, which is a favourite of mine, so I might pick that up again at some point soon, and work out which purple Straw Hats go in which decks, which ones don't go in which decks, because it's not all uniform. Some work better than others depending on the leader. We have 4 different categories of purple Straw Hats to look at. So we have the stuff that came in Starter Deck 18 recently, the new stuff that's coming with OP09, the original stuff that came in OP05, and then there's a few miscellaneous things that were scattered throughout the sets. So let's look at the Starter Deck 18 stuff first, because that is kind of like the stuff that you're going to feel like putting in all of the decks most, maybe. The big one is 7 cost Luffy, or Luffy Taro. I'm just going to call him Luffy for the purpose of this video. Now, the problem with this card is it only plays purple cards, so you're mostly going to want to play it in the decks that run more purple than not. So Mono Purple Luffy is absolutely the best place for it, and not only because all of your deck is guaranteed to be purple, but it works best with this leader as far as playing this on curve. So Purple Luffy, the way I play it, you want to go first. On your second turn, use your leader ability, that puts you at 4 Don. And on your third turn, use your leader ability again, and that puts you on 7 Don. And that gets him out as early as possible. To put him in any other deck, to play him as early, you need to have other ways of ramping. So he doesn't come out on curve quite so nicely in the other decks. So I definitely think Purple Luffy is the best place for him, but that doesn't mean he can't go in any of the other decks. The one deck I would say you probably don't put him in would be Lim, because you're more likely to be running more green cards in Lim. But you could, in theory, if you put enough purple in there, play him in there. Another reason not to put him in Lim is you don't really need to. With the leader ability playing Odyssey characters for the cost of 3, you're getting enough value for Don that you don't need the help of a 7 cost Luffy playing another character off itself. So you can play an Odyssey character with your leader ability and then have enough Don to spare to play a character for full cost, and that way you're not running as many clunky cards without counter. So I would say he can be played in every one of these decks, but the best choice is Purple Luffy. And that's going to go the same for the 4 cost Zoro. So he only searches purple Straw Hats. So if you're running enough purple Straw Hats in any of these 5 decks, he's fine in there. But the less purple you have, the less likely you're going to want to put him in there. At the moment, I'm testing a little idea with Robin where I'm a bit more purple focused. There's enough yellow in there that I ramp once or twice. The Monster Trio combo does feel pretty good in Robin, but still not as good as it feels in Purple Luffy. The 5 cost Sanji, I would say, can go in all of these decks. It is just pretty good. It costs 5, but you know, even if you're hard casting him and not playing him off 7 cost Luffy, he will get value in any of these decks, because all he does is he draws if you have 8 or more Don. So all of these decks can have 8 or more Don, and that's no issue. The 4 cost Nami, pretty much the same deal as the Sanji. She can go in any of the decks, except for probably Lim, because obviously Lim plays everything in rest mode, so that is no good for blockers that don't have abilities to restand themselves. 3 cost Usopp goes in all of these decks, and probably any purple deck, because it's just really good at resting blockers when you're going for game. The only thing it needs is 8 or more Don, and then it will rest 5 costs or less, which, you know, is the majority of blockers that are going to be an issue for you. So now we're moving on to the OP09 cards. I'm not going to look at every card, but just the ones that are more likely going to catch your eye. So the 3 cost Zoro is a must for purple black Luffy, because this is a nice ramp ability that only really ramps if you're playing it in purple black. So you will return 1 or more Don, and then put a Don back in active. So if you put this in any other deck, you're basically paying 3 and then untapping 1. But if you play it in purple black Luffy, his leader ability comes into effect, so you end up ramping 2 active Don and 1 rested Don. So that puts you at a net total of +1 Don and +1 inactive. So it's a must for purple black Luffy. You can put it in any of the other decks. It doesn't get its full use, but it kind of does in a way, because you're essentially paying 2 for it. 7 cost Sanji on play minuses 1 or more Don, and then he gains rush and rests an opponent's 6 cost or less. This is great in everything except for probably Lim, because once again Lim plays everything in rest mode. There's an argument to say you could still play it in Lim if you just want the rest ability, and then you can attack with Sanji on the next turn. But Lim has plenty of other ways to rest things anyway, so it's not really going to be worth doing that. 4 cost Frankie likewise can go in everything except for Lim. Once again, it's a blocker, so you're probably not going to want to play it in Lim. And, you know, the exception is you still could if you wanted that draw 2 trash 1 ability. 5 cost Chopper. Now this is the one to put in Lim, because this one, at the end of your turn, you can return 1 or more Don from your field and then set this character as active, and it gains blocker. You can use this in all of the decks, but it is nice in Lim because she does already have enough blockers that have the ability to restand themselves. But if you want a little bit more blocker, you got Chopper. 9 cost Luffy, the secret rare. You can put him in everything basically, except for Lim. Once again, the same caveat, you could still put him in Lim if you really wanted to, but he won't get to make use of that rush. But it is a 9 cost character with 10,000 power that draws a card on play. So not the worst, but at the same time, you have other 9 costs you'd probably prefer to put in Lim, like the green Zoro. Okay, moving on to OP09, and there's the 3 cost Zoro, the one that if you have 3 or less life when attacking will ramp it down. In my opinion, the only deck I would say needs this is red purple Luffy. Every other deck you could put it in, but I don't see why you would. There's better ways to ramp. It's good in Luffy because you're already at 3 or less life, so it gets value straight away. But it is generally, in other decks, I don't think it's as good. You could just play a Mr. 2 or something instead, and you get that ramp straight away without the threat of it dying before you even get to use it. The 5 cost Jinbei blocker is a card that I particularly like. It's in my purple Luffy deck at the moment. I would say it might get replaced with the new Chopper once I can put that in. I really like this card with the 7 cost Luffy combo. So sometimes you don't have a Sanji in hand, you could play Jinbei instead. And the same goes for Chopper. So basically I think you could put this in any deck that is running the 7 cost Luffy. 4 cost Robin is another card that I really like, but it is at this point power crept out. You have the Gum Gum Lightning, which is a nice piece of removal. This Robin was in my mono purple Luffy deck as a piece of removal that still had Straw Hat trait, and you know, it isn't the greatest piece of removal, but it worked for what I was doing in my list. But now you can replace her with Gum Gum Lightning, or if you're playing purple black, you have the black Sanji that works perfectly in that deck and hits 5 cost or less, which is better than hitting 3 cost or less, and only when you have 8 or more done. The 10 cost Luffy is just a favorite card of mine. Now you could put this in any of these decks in my opinion. I think it is a nice idea in Lim where it's kind of like Pseudo Rush, because you'll play it and it'll come in rest mode, but you get to do the thing where you get the second turn and then it'll be active again. So that's kind of like, if you feel like Lim needs Rush, you could put that in there. But in order of best fit, I would say the best leaders for 10 cost Luffy is Purple Black, then Red Purple, then Mono Purple, and then Lim and Robin are kind of equal, I suppose. Maybe Lim better than Robin because it gets around the fact that Rush is useless in her deck. And now we have the miscellaneous. We have Afro Luffy. Now this thing is a Don -3. If your opponent has 3 or more characters, set this as active. So this is, I'd probably only consider it in Purple Black Luffy, because Purple Black Luffy obviously wants to Don -2 Don or more at any rate for his leader ability. So that's where he probably fits the best. And it's, you know, it's a cute card, but you might not actually run it. But it's just an idea I'm throwing out there. We've got the Banish Zoro. So he, you know, he's a Straw Hat with Banish. You could put him in anything, really. Maybe you could put him in Robin just for extra Banish power. But he's a little bit clunky, just like Afro Luffy in the cost benefit. Raid Suit Sanji. So this is a 2k counter. You could, and you can also play it as a blocker if you have 2 or more less Don than your opponent. That's going to come up more often if you're playing a deck that minuses a lot. So for example, you play Gear 5. So Purple Black is the best choice. Some of the choices that I don't think there's any reason when there might be other better 2k counters. But in any of these decks that minus enough that you end up having less Don than your opponent, enough that you could play him as a blocker, he gets more value in that sense. And let's look at some cards that you should put in any of these decks, all of these decks, if you're running Straw Hats. Trafalgar Law searches for Straw Hats. Doesn't specify the color, so you can put him in Lim and search all the green Straw Hats in that deck, and that's great. Gum Gum Giant, very strong counter event card. The only problem is it requires a Straw Hat leader, so you can't put it in Lim, but I would put it in every other Straw Hat leader that has access to purple. So that concludes my rundown of all the purple Straw Hats and what decks they can and cannot go in. There are more purple Straw Hats that I didn't go over, like for example this Brook and this Brook. You can come up with all sorts of ideas if you're creative enough, but I wanted to go over the main ones that people are going to be thinking about, and you know, making sure you put them in the right leader, because they don't always fit in all of them, as we went over. So I hope this helps you out in your deck building, and I hope you enjoy this new set. It's looking good, and I'll see you guys soon.